I'm going to start. So good morning, everyone. We are going to begin the program now. Namira, please start the program.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, everyone. I hope
I
you're
hope
all
you're all
doing
doing.
well. So, today's concourse is going to be a very fruitful session for those who want to explore journalism. In this career counseling session on building a career in journalism, we are graced with our esteemed speaker, Mr. Anshul Trivedi, who will guide us on the ins and outs of journalism. Mr. Anshul Trivedi is a founding member and editorial advisor of Subha Savere, India's first Hindi daily newspaper. He has done BA from Ruya College, Mumbai, and MA and MPhil in Political Science from Center for Political Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. He has written op-ed articles for national dailies like Hindustan Times, Indian Express, Dainik Bhaskar, and premier web portals like The Wire and The Quint. Now, I humbly invite Sir to take on the virtual stage and share his insights with the students. And while he does the same, I request the students to please drop their queries in the chat box to the Q&A section. Thank you.
Thank you, Namira. Thank you, Akansha, for inviting me, and good morning to all the students. Um, which language should I speak in? It should be all English or should it be mixed? I can use Hindi and English both. Which would you be comfortable in?
Sir, anything would work.
Okay, so today I'd like to tell you about how the profession of journalism has evolved over a period of time. Because what we are undergoing today is a technological revolution. We are going through a phase of great change, and and journalism has not been left untouched by this great change which we are witnessing across the spectrum. Not only in this field, but we are looking at it in terms of business, in terms of technology, in terms of how basic new forms of businesses have come up, and how journalism is evolved and is responding to it, and how a person who aspires to be a journalist today needs to prepare for this. So uh, there is a basic contradiction at the heart of this profession of journalism, because it is basically the activity of collecting and disseminating information. That is what journalism is. And in modern democracies, information is considered a right because our system functions on the consent generated by an informed citizenry. So, in a sense, journalism can be called an essential service of society. As a result, you must have seen when the entire country went on into a shutdown, journalists were allowed to roam free, because without information, we cannot function. Our whole system collapses. And so, journalism is also called the fourth pillar of democracy. Whether it should still be called a fourth pillar of democracy, I would leave it up to you after my presentation is over. Uh, so, the paradox of information and journalism is that it is at once a right and a commodity. For example, you have a right to life, but there is no business attached to it. But with information, you need to. It's a right. You require it to exist. You require it for this system to function. But at the same time, it is sold and exchanged like a commodity in a marketplace. It has a profit motive attached to it, and it is this contradiction between a right and the commodity of information that shapes the field of journalism and defines what it means to be a journalist today. Um, there have been so if we trace how journalism has evolved in India over a period of time, you might get a better picture of how this change has taken place. The first phase of our journalism in India was during the national movement, and it had a very pronounced activist streak. It was funded by big Indian industrialists who were invested in the project of anti-colonialism. This phase saw the establishment of legacy media houses like Hindustan Times, the Times of India, and the Hindu. So at that time, the industrialists wanted an independent country, and the British Raj, the British government, was against their interests. And so they aligned themselves with the national media, and we got our activist brand of journalism. It was in this phase, journalism was a means of propagating nationalist ideas or ideas of equality, liberty, and fraternity. And that is why you would see that most of our freedom fighters, like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, he took out a newspaper called the Kesari. Baba Saheb Ambedkar took out a newspaper called Bahishkrit Bharat to highlight Dalit issues. Mahatma Gandhi started the portal Harijan and Young India to converse with the people. So at once they were reporting and educating the masses. This changed after we got independence. And in the post-independence period, except for a few aberrations among the post-colonized, post-colonial countries who gained independence in the middle of the 20th century, we had a stellar record in terms of ensuring a free media. If you look at those countries which got independence with us, they had very bad records in terms of providing a freedom to the press and giving the right to freely express or oppose the governments at the time. There were primarily two mediums of news dissemination at the time, the radio and the newspapers. Now the radio was monopolized by the state, but the newspapers still were owned by the civil society actors or businessmen, and there was a relative freedom. There was a period in emergency when these rights were scuttled, and there was a kind of a struggle between the government and the media, but the media stood tall, especially portals like Indian Express and the Hindu. They stood up to the government, and that is known as a glorious phase of journalism in India, where we spoke back to the government, which was excessively clamping down on our rights. And then the first big disruption came after the globalization and marketization of the media space. So with the onset of television journalism, the format in which the news was produced and consumed changed completely. However, at that time, in '92, not many people had the expertise or the money to start many TV news channels. And so there were only a few private players in the television news industry, and only a few noteworthy newsmakers or anchors which controlled the industry. Thank goodness for that, if we compare it with the current situation. But this added, a side of glamour to the profession which was missing. चेहरे की कीमत होने लगी journalism में. Before that, journalism, you did not have the concept of an anchor. You didn't have star journalists. You had people who were behind the scenes, who were known for their writings, who were known for their voice, but the face became the center point of journalism as television evolved. And it is said that politics is show business for ugly people. Journalism opened up another avenue for such vain souls who wanted to be on television. And it's very interesting. If you listen to a TED talk by one of the premier anchors, I was in my preparation to give a talk to you, I was trying to watch some speeches and some talks given by journalists, leading journalists of our country. And I chanced upon a TED talk of Rohit Sardana, who's an anchor with Aaj Tak. And he said that he came into the profession of journalism by chance. He actually wanted to be an actor. He wanted to be on TV. And because, not everyone succeeds in Bollywood and becomes an actor, and he was not very tall and stout and all of that. So he decided to come to television and television news, because chehra dikhna chahiye. Mujhe TV pe aana hai. This was something radically new in journalism at the time. And this gave rise to a phenomenon called infotainment. Whereas till now, media was confined to providing information, analyzing that information, providing facts and figures, and providing satire on against the government and the powers. Now, an element of entertainment was fused into how information was being disseminated, because as more and more private players came in and the news industry became a very competitive field, the competition to grab eyeballs changed the nature of how news was presented to the people. And this TRP war essentially started what I will say the downfall of Indian media and media across the globe, actually. Before, if you would see the programming that various channels introduced at that time. You got shows on astrology, Vastu Shastra, Shivji ki Gufa, Aghori ka Badla, and all of such programming, which was completely absent during the earlier phase of journalism. This came in because profit became the driving motive, and competition was so strict that it was so stern that these new so-called innovations dial down the content of news and information within broadcasting and increase the value of entertainment, which had nothing to do with news actually. However, for 2 decades, print and television coexisted harmoniously until let's say in India, which say from 2009-10, the internet revolution disrupted print journalism completely. And now it has revolutionized how content is being created across the board, even for television. With the rise and popularization of social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, the arrangement between print and television and their roles in the news media ecosystem changed completely. Now, this technological revolution has brought in a sort of what we are called an era of convergence. And it had some very pronounced effects on how the news media industry was kind of, going on. Firstly, breaking news made novelty of a newspaper a thing of the past. Usually newspapers brought you news, a frontline meant something. When you opened a newspaper the next day, it was your first take on what had happened in yesterday, or a day gone past, or something which had happened. But with in this era of notifications, and instant news, instant breaking news, newspapers lost novelty because you already knew what had happened. So why would you open a newspaper tomorrow? Because you already know all the information is on your mobile screen. This changed how newspapers strategized and tried to cope up, something which maybe through the course of discussion we can come up with. Secondly, with Twitter and Facebook, newspapers and television no longer remain the primary mediums of information. When I say information, it's basically the conveying facts. So when politicians and newsmakers and celebrities and officers and activists, all of them joined Twitter, they kind of they made the reporter, the basic function of reporting, of giving information to people, redundant. In order to not be misquoted, you would get government notifications, you'll get government orders. They will be released by ministers, they'll be released by politicians. The politicians would bypass a journalist and through their Twitter account will release a statement on a certain event that has taken place, their reaction. So the journalist who was going to be the primary medium of disseminating information no longer played that role. And this change also brought about a radical shift in the news cycle and the expected hours of work of a journalist. So, for example, an average day of a print media journalist would be that he or she would wake up, call in his or her sources, glance through all the newspapers to get a feel of what was the news ecosystem of the day. And then he or she would go to office, they would have an editorial meeting, and they would discuss what are the newsworthy events, if in the city or in the country or in the state, whichever is their brief. They would form a strategy for the day. People would be assigned to their beats, and then they would go in and kind of bring in a story. They'll work a story for the entire day, and in the night at around 7:30, 8, when the newspapers are being designed, it's their deadline, and they kind of given their the stories for the day, and then they would go away and at 9, 10, 11, whatever, at the time that they get off, and that was done, and that was their day. However, with the coming of the internet revolution, the day this cycle was disrupted. Now, because you had to break, आज तक सबसे तेज आपने यहाँ पे सबसे पहले सुना, and every news media portal, every newspaper has an online presence. Everything from the time the sun rises to the time when majority of the country goes to sleep. So, for example, from 7 a.m. to say 11, 12 is the news cycle today. It is relentless and it is unending, and it goes on continuously. But this break in technology also led to force the journalists to upgrade in their skills. What do I mean by that? I mean, earlier the basic skill of a journalist was to write and to report and to be on the streets and kind of have a network of information. But now a unidimensional journalist cannot survive. He needs to be well versed with writing. He needs to be well versed with the camera, editing techniques, scripting, making videos, news videos which are designed and choreographed for different audiences. So the skill levels expected of a journalist changed over a period of time. And this then became an era wherein we went from content creation, from news curation, the primary job of a journalist, to content creation. Now journalists are supposed to create content. Even those who are writing op-eds for example, CNBC, portals of CNBC or ABP or any of the leading web portals, they are attached as content creators. So you will see portals like Lallantop have proliferated. There are very many kind of portals which are locally based, which are creating content via very low production cost of a mobile phone and a camera, and they are very popular and effective in a local setting, and they actually they have more trust. They enjoy more trust than most of the television media. But this technological revolution also brought about something very new which was not known at the time. It brought in the phenomenon of fact-checking websites, which we did not have until 6-7 years ago. So now we have fact-checking websites like Alt News and Boom Live, which are essential parts of the news ecosystem. And why is this? Why is there a proliferation of fake news in this country and across the world? I mean, in America, Trump used to say that he's being targeted by fake news, and then the alternative side also said that he's lying, and his lies were called out on national television. Why is it that fake news has become such a big thing? And there are basically two reasons for it. The first reason, of course, is that a lot of this hurry to kind of upload news and be ahead of the competitors, and instantly bringing news and breaking news and providing information, takes away from vetting whether all the facts are in place, whether what has been said is actually correct, whether there is no time to double check with the source. That is one aspect of it, the time aspect of it. The other aspect is that now in this era where things have to go viral, content is made in a certain way to make it viral, but information was not supposed to be curated that way. Information was information. If something goes wrong in say for example in your locality, there is a drain which is blocked, or there is an accident that takes place, or there is some inconsistency in how the local hospital is working, you vetted that entire process, you double checked with the source, you kind of went and got all the views together. However, now that is a thing of the past, because you have to keep up with the pace of journalism. And these news media portals, I would suggest that you please watch on the Netflix documentary called Social Dilemma. So now most of us get our news from social media platforms, which were not designed as news sharing platforms. They had nothing to do with journalism. And you would see that Mark Zuckerberg was called in by the US Congress and was said that you are spreading fake news, it is compromising our electoral process, and you need to bring in fact checking, and he simply refused. Similarly, there were revelations right now that Facebook is in cohorts with the government, is doctoring its feed in order to promote its interest, because Facebook is a profit-making industry. It does not have anything to do with news or the sanctity of news. It just wants more users and wants to create content which grab your attention. So it is in cohorts with people who have a certain agenda, with the rich and the powerful. And this has led to this new era in journalism where there is hyper narrativization and bias in the media. So for example, in the early phase, narrativization was not a phenomenon which was associated with journalism. It was more about authenticity and correctness. But now there are multiple narratives, because social media is designed in a way wherein sensationalism pays and the reality is very boring. I'll give you a few examples. For example, during the lockdown, there was a major story on Jamaati spreading corona, and they had a markers and they were spitting on the officials who were trying to get them, and all of this went on television news channels, and this was propagated through the Facebook, and there was these people are doing this on purpose, and everyone got to know about that. But when the Supreme Court or the Delhi High Court, I don't remember which one, said that they were actually trapped in the markers, they were actually trapped in the mosque, and they were not doing all of those things, and the media had been very unkind to them and non-objective, this was not covered by the media. And this is the power that those who control images have. I mean, the Jamaati spreading corona got disproportionate amount, that fake news, that false news got disproportionate amount of coverage, whereas when the court, based on vetting all the evidence which was provided in a court of law, gave them a clean sheet, it hardly reached people. Similarly, Sushant Singh Rajput's suicide, that was blown out of proportion. People lost their minds over justice for Sushant. And I would like to ask you, what has happened to that case? At one point in time, there was nothing but justice for Sushant on the television, approaching the Bihar elections, and now it's gone. And similarly, you're seeing various issues of farmers' protests, and these protests are, someone is calling them anti-national, someone is calling them terrorists. The others are, there are other non-mainstream media portals who are actually going and talking to those people. And, if you see those portals, you will find a very different picture of what is actually going on in the farmers' protests. So we have become fundamentally divided as a society because of this technological revolution. And I'll give you an example of this. How profound the impact of information and the social media and the new news ecosystem is on the running of a democracy. So recently, about 10 years ago, after the financial crisis, Europe underwent a Great Depression and Greece became a very indebted country. There was a revolutionary kind of a break there. And there was this party which came in, which was a new party. It was called Syriza. It was led by a 35-year-old man. And they fought an election overnight. It was like the Aam Aadmi Party there. And they became the primary opposition. And when they sat down and they were collating the results, they found out that the young people, they had voted for Syriza, the new alternative, and the old people had voted for the old conservative parties, the establishment parties, if you will. And in their brainstorming, they found out that this was because their voting choices were dictated by how they were consuming news media. So the younger generation, which was tech savvy, which was on social media and got majority of their news from the social media, they voted for Syriza, the new alternative. And the old people, say from the bracket of 50 to 80, who also vote in a large majority in European, in Western countries, they got their news from television, which was controlled by the corporates and the establishment, and hence this dictated that they voted in a certain way, which was against the new alternative. However, over a period of time, in the next election, Syriza was able to with time get into power, because as social media got entrenched in their society, and the political narrative also changed. And this narrative based media, although it has led to polarization, it has also led to the creation of new platforms and new experiments in journalism, wherein there is a convergence of opinion and news. So you will now have those who have been excluded and oppressed in a society come up with their own kind of news portals. So maybe before 6 years, you would not have portals like National Dastak, who would cover Bahujan issues, who would take a partisan stand and try and portray reality from the perspective of Bahujans. You would not have had something like the Dalit Camera, which was amplifying issues of Dalits, their daily hardships, their economic conditions, the discrimination that they face, or portals like Forward Press, which have a certain ideological bent. And this brings me to this whole point of, what happened to objectivity and credibility. Today, the media is undergoing a phase wherein its credibility is at its lowest. And there is this whole debate in philosophy, in our everyday lives and everywhere, whether someone can actually be objective. And well, while complete objectivity is something which we cannot aim for, because as humans we all have our biases, it is much better to have an honest discussion by forthrightly bringing out your biases and then kind of trying to arrive upon a certain discussion or a debate, or the nature of events, analyze the nature of events. But there are certain things that news as journalists and news media that we can do to get back objectivity and credibility, and that is to get back to reporting, old school, old-fashioned ground reporting, rather than merging opinions with reports, decoupling ourselves from narrativization and going back to objectively reporting what was happening, because there is nothing called neutrality. And while I appreciate what Ravish Kumar says, he says that a journalist needs to be anti-establishment. I disagree with him. A journalist does not necessarily need to be anti-establishment. He or she has to be pro-constitution and pro-society, because it is the constitution which in the first place has given him or her the right to be a journalist, to question the government, to bring out news and to challenge power. It is the constitution which has constituted the journalist, and hence he or she does not need to be anti-establishment at all times. He or she has to defend the values of the constitution. And if we do that, I'll quickly wrap up the whole thing. In this new age, a journalist, because the economy is bad and it is unlikely to get any better in the next 5, 6, 7 years, and in news media, there is a bloodbath going on inside the news media. I mean, since the GST has come in, small and medium newspapers are struggling. Those portals which which were not funded by corporates, which were providing employment earlier, they are struggling. So in such an economy, there are 3 things that a journalist, an aspiring journalist, needs to do. And this is not going to get away anytime soon, because our economy is on a downward spiral. It is not going to improve in the next 5 years maybe. And the media ecosystem, which is undergoing a revolution, and newspapers are cutting down on the people that they're hiring, and news is being produced by at a smaller cost, with greater editing tools coming in, and all of that. There is a major layoff in this industry. And so in order to thrive in this industry, I would say that you need, if you are an aspiring journalist today, develop a specialization. This brings me back to how newspapers are kind of responding to not being the breakers of news anymore. They are introducing analysis as the centerpiece of journalism now, and newspaper. So when you open a newspaper now, you open it for journalism. And this has opened new fields like data journalism. So those who are well versed with interpreting data, have a basic knowledge of the economy, they are being hired. Then you have portals like Live Law coming up. So people who have an understanding of law, they are people who have an understanding of politics and all of those things. The more and more the competition and this social media advances, the more is the requirement to have a specialization to get hired in today's economy. Secondly, develop multiple skills. You cannot only have a single skill that you can write, or you can speak, or you can report. No, or you can edit. You need to have a much broader training in terms of the skills that you have, because the squeeze in the media industry today is real, and this is the future of journalism. You will not only be a writer, you will also be a presenter, you will be a script writer, you will be a content creator, you will also have to edit your stories. So you'll have to develop multiple skills. And finally, with the proliferation of social media, you need to be multilingual. Yeah, the age of a single language journalist is going to be over pretty soon, because there is a huge market in all the vernacular languages as well, which is growing. There are news portals in Hindi, there are news portals in Marathi and other regional languages which are making super profits, and they would like to hire. But at the same time, you need to have a command over at least one more language, so that you are hired in this market. And finally, while these are the new things that you need to do, as a journalist, as someone who has been involved in taking out a newspaper every day, see, you don't need a degree to be a journalist. My father was a journalist. He does not have a degree in journalism. While it helps, but you learn on the job. This is not something like something like engineering or something, because it's something on the field. So get out on the field. But when you get out on the field, you get out with a certain base, a certain knowledge base, because India is unthinkably diverse. And the conversation that we are having here, maybe 2 kilometers down the line, if you go and try and meet a janta, aam janta, he or she will not relate to what is being talked about here. So read about Indian history, read Indian sociology, because it is very diverse, and unfortunately our politics is stuck in history. So you need to have a basic idea of history in order to understand the present politics of India. And finally, go outside and experience it. Journalism is like love. You have to do it to, kind of be good at it. That is what I'm trying to say. Finally, just report the truth. You don't have to like the truth to report it. And I hope that you would have found my talk useful. Thank you.
Thank you for such an invigorating session, sir. It was indeed our privilege to have you here today. I'm sure the students have learned a thing or two, perhaps even more about journalism and how to pursue a career in it. So, moving on, I once again request students to please drop their questions because we're about to commence with the Q&A session. And I'll just go through the chat box now. Okay. So, I'd actually like to proceed with one of my own questions for now because I feel like it is really going to be relevant for college going students. So, what is the prerequisite, sir, for interning with a newspaper outlet, and how can freshers get such an opportunity?
Actually, interning is something
Mm.
which should not be that difficult, provided that you're willing not to be paid for it these days.
Yep.
I mean, most of the journalists and newspapers thrive on unpaid labor of interns. So, I mean, I worked with the Hindustan Times for 2 months as an intern in my BA, and that changed my perspective. I would suggest you to try and get in touch with maybe your department can get you in touch with those newspapers. You can get in touch with a local journalist, or you can simply go and ask. I mean, if I mean, everyone loves free labor in the newspaper industry, so they would hire an intern. And I would recommend internships because
Mhm.
what you learn in the books and what you learn in the field are poles apart, and as a journalist you need to learn on the field. So either ask your professors to get you in touch, either get in contact with a senior journalist and ask for it, or you can simply go and kind of ask someone in charge, the bureau chief or someone.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So, moving on, we have a question um, from Nabila Abid. So, I've met many people who are currently pursuing mass communication, but they don't want to necessarily pursue a career in journalism. Sorry, they don't want to necessarily pursue a career in India due to the political climate. So, according to you, sir, what really is the future of journalism in India?
See, journalism is an essential service. So
Mhm.
journalism will always be there. Whether they will be journalists or not is something that we don't know. One. Second, I mean, again, it's not only India. I mean, you go to the USA, those people who are reporting in African American ghettos, or those who are anti-government, or there is polarization across the world. You go to Europe, there is a rise of proto-fascist movements. You go to America, you go to Brazil right now, you go to Russia. Journalism is not easy. That is why, I mean, there used to be an exalted status of journalists in our society because it was an essential service.
Hmm.
And if you think that India is polarized, I mean, I don't think that there are many better places. And if there are better places, I don't know why they would hire you. They would have their own people. So if you are trying to make a career, I would say that this is a passing phase. These are
Hmm.
phases that we don't choose the phases that we are born in history,
Hmm.
and we kind of have to make do with what best we are offered with. So, for
Hmm.
example, a lot of people would say that, why was I born in 1920s? In the 1940s in Europe, there was a war. I wanted to chill, but
Hmm.
unfortunately, that is not up to us. So we'll have to make do with, what we are given.
Hmm.
And
Thank you.
it's not better anywhere right now.
Yeah,
And it's
exactly.
not going to be for the next 10, 15 years. So by
Hmm.
that time, you all will be 40. So that would be too late to start a career.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. So, next question is from Anandita Singh. What are the behind the scenes work opportunities in journalism or mass communication for those who are not necessarily into broadcast media?
Yeah, so as I said, I mean, broadcast is now something which is actually fighting to stay relevant. But the camera has become important not only in news industry, it has become a part of our lives. And so, although I mean, there are huge number of people who are doing a great job in newspapers. I mean, you have Neha Dikshit, you have P. Sainath, uh, you have a lot of people. I mean, these are the two that come to my mind. But the written word is going out or
Hmm.
is being challenged by the camera. So, broadcast or being in front of the camera or having those skills, as I said, is something which is very important. Because even the best journalists today are who are in newspaper journalism. For example, I have a friend in the Hindu, is the associate editor of the Hindu, Srini, and he was never a person who used to come in the front, and he was very very erudite and all of that. But the poor fellow, he also has to make videos now. The international affairs editor of the Hindu, he also has to make videos now. So you can't dodge the camera, although you should not be enamored by it. And the basics of journalism are those of print journalism. But be prepared. This is the age of the camera lens.
Hmm. Thank you, sir. So moving on, we have a question from Komal Jakar. Sir, we often see journalism twisting reality, where it is a weapon to combat falsehood. On the contrary, it also at times becomes a source of propaganda by fostering one sided and radical views. To what extent have these elements changed the true face of journalism?
Uh, so this is a very important question, actually. Uh, See, I don't believe in golden ages. There has never been a golden age, neither of India, nor of the USA, nor of journalism, nor of any religion. Golden ages don't exist. At different points in time, media has been compromised and has been, in cohorts with the government and tried to peddle its agenda. There have been phases in journalism and in its history wherein it has misreported things. There was a time when it was said that uh, the government has undue pull with the newspapers and objectivity is being compromised. But today, you have a nominally free media. What is happening is that media has become subservient to corporate interests, because not everyone has the money to run newspapers or broadcast a channel or broadcast news. It takes a lot of money, and that is basically wherein the problem, in my opinion, lies. Because if someone gives you 100 crores to run a news channel or a television portal, they will have certain interests and they would want to achieve those interests. Now it is up to you how you kind of navigate it. Yes, with the social media coming in, falsehood has actually been spread at an industrial level. People say that this is the post-truth age. I disagree with it. It is not the post-truth age. It is just that lies are, we have the technology to lie at an industrial scale. The truth remains as it was. And so, if you look at 1960s and 70s, 50s, 60s, the US society during that period, a famous African American activist called Malcolm X, he said that if you are not careful, the newspaper, and this is not even the social media, he say that the newspaper will have the villains looking like heroes and the heroes looking like villains. So this is not something new. The African Americans were targeted, they were called terrorists and all of that. So whenever there is a process of polarization in a society, a churning which is going on, such challenges come up. But even in these times, you have people like Ravish Kumar who are doing their job. You have people like Sainath doing their job. So and also, I mean, with time, I mean, this is also very new. The social media technology is very recent. So even countries are, kind of getting to terms in terms of how to deal with these things. So recently, Australia has started charging Google for the searches that are made in by Australian citizens in its vicinity. So all of these kind of things are going to come up, and we will have mechanisms. These technology giants are evil, in my opinion, and this there will be regulations with time to come. Already, you would see that the society is coming up with fact checking portals, and fact checking has become something of a mainstream thing in the news ecosystem, which was not present 5 years ago. So it's a process which is going on. You can start by being truthful and not hating. That is the least that you can do, and then the rest of the structure will take care of itself.
Hmm. All right. Thank you, sir. So the next question is from Gaurav Garg. What are your thoughts on modern organizations such as Vice News, Vox, etc.? From what I've seen, they are either disregarded and labeled as extremely radical or pseudo intellectual or followed blindly. It would be great if you could draw some contrast between these organizations and old school news hubs.
So as I told you, first of all, pseudo intellectual is a term that the right wing uses, and don't fall into all of this. Neither become a blind supporter of any portal. I mean, these are tendencies in a society, and these tendencies have always been there. It's not something new. But Vice, I mean, it's not only the Vice News or these kind of. They are very good portals, in my opinion. They're making good content tailored outside of the media industry. The problem is that I mean, since Vice and all of these are part of the American media infrastructure, uh, what are the mainstream television news portals or news channels in America right now? What is the credibility of those mediums? Let's start from there. So if you have an MSNBC, which is totally liberal, and then you have a Fox News. If you watch Fox News for 1 hour, you would say that the Muslims are going to take over America in the next 2 hours. The immigrants are going to eat away everything. The Mexicans are going to take over America. If you look at MSNBC, I mean, during the Hillary Clinton campaign, I made the mistake of following that election, American election, through MSNBC, and I thought that Hillary Clinton was winning. And then the election day came in, and I was surprised. But I did not know that 50% of America watches Fox News, and they don't care about what is happening at MSNBC. In such a polarized environment, wherein what I call the narrativized version of journalism today, outlets like Vice are actually doing a great service. अब क्या है, भक्त बनना तो टेंडेंसी होती है, किसी को ब्लाइंडली फॉलो करना लेफ्ट राइट में टेंडेंसी होती है, उसका कुछ किया नहीं जा सकता. हमारी सोसाइटी में वो थोड़ी ज्यादा है, क्योंकि बचपन से हमें सिखाते हैं वैसे बनना. बट आई मीन these portals are actually trying to redefine how news is consumed, as long as they are sticking to certain, see, anything has to be measured on certain standards. And a standard for any journalistic endeavor is, whether it is giving in verified news, whether it is giving space to all the stakeholders involved in an event or a story, and whether it is staying truthful to the entire episode that is going on. As long as that is being done, you cannot dictate what the portal is trying to see. I mean, it's my perspective as to how I want to, watch things, portray things. There are certain things. So, for example, you look at the editorial choices in mainstream news channels in India today. So, if you go and see Sudarshan News, it has made its editorial choices. It gives you certain kind of news. Then you look at NDTV, it has its own kind of a vision. But the difference is that you can verify NDTV's news. I cannot stop someone from making an editorial choice. What I can expect from that editorial choice is to be truthful about it, bring in verifiability into the entire system, and that is the gold standard. It's not at all time. Even Gandhi was called radical. After he died, he's called conservative. So these labels, don't get stuck in these labels. That's not a good way to think about society.
Thank you, sir. So moving on, we have another question by Aditya Agarwal. So today we see dissemination of false information. So how can we as students differentiate between right and false information, which eventually leads to brainwashing?
Actually, see, as I said, this is a very new thing which has come in. Uh, we we are a country of semi-literates. We are not illiterate, and we are not very educated. We are somewhere in between. And so what happens is that we are in an urban sphere. We belong to a certain class, and we have all gone to certain colleges. So we have had the wherewithal to kind of process what is happening and reflect. We have the time to reflect. During my fieldwork, I went to a place called Ali Rajpur. This is the second most backward district of India. It is 91% tribal, and news is being consumed there as well. But the fellow on the ground, he does not have the knowledge required to kind of differentiate truth and false. It's not his fault. He did not, he's just, he's trying to come to terms with it. I would actually say that, we need to introduce modules of trying to find verifiable news, fake news. See, until now in journalism colleges, we had a training to kind of, uh, present news, to give news. But now we need to teach people how to consume news as well. That is something very important, and this has to be done at the school level and at the college level. But at an individual level, first of all, subscribe to Alt News and Boom Live and all of those things, because they stay true to the facts. At the same time, don't respond immediately. Don't form an opinion immediately. Give it time. Try, and while see, the problem is that who am I to say? Even I use social media more than is good for myself. But we are so plugged into social media, which is based on our attention is their commodity. So try and get yourself off the grid, and it's we have to come to terms with this technology which is giving us information, more than trying to regulate the information, because that is not in our hands. That mechanism we don't have. So how we consume the news, give it time, let it happen. Don't form an opinion over a period of time immediately. Make it over a period of time. Try and get as many sides as possible to a story, and always know that nothing is as bad as it is being told on the television, and nothing is as good as it is being told on the television. So kind of we have to regulate ourselves until we find a way to regulate the industry.
Thank you, sir, for your insights. So yesterday I was reading an article on journalism, and there was a finding. So according to CPJ, India ranks 14th among states where journalists are killed and the killers go free. Journalists are murdered. Just a second, sir. Okay. So journalists, simultaneously, the other tactic is to impose heavy fines, such as the hefty sum of $1.35 billion defamation suit by Reliance Group against NDTV for reporting on the lack of transparency in the Rafale jet deal between Reliance and their French counterpart. And journalists are basically murdered for reporting on sensitive issues such as child marriage, corruption in sand mining, and corrupt police officers, and for reporting on sensitized areas like Kashmir. So, all these factors lead to a sense of hesitation because, in all honesty, if I were to pursue a career in journalism or any other field for that matter, I would want to retain my freedom of expression and not lose my life for raising my voice. And there are journalists that receive an influx of death threats every other day on social media for using their fundamental rights. So, setting aside this dark side, which is, you know, absolutely disturbing and is also a major defect that keeps people from wanting to pursue journalism in India, or I think now, as you've mentioned earlier, it would be applicable to, the entire world, basically. So, what are the factors that should motivate them instead?
See, uh, without doubt, um, we are we are going through an illiberal revolution across the globe, and this is not restricted to India. I mean,
Hmm.
you go to Russia, you'd find a similar scene. You go to Pakistan, you'll find a similar scene. Except for those places where, I mean, Europe and the USA, wherein these institutions, these liberal institutions, had a very deep root and had a very long history. Uh, Democracy and democratic values and basic press freedoms are under attack. This is not something restricted to India. So what happened in India was that usually uh, there was a certain, if you look at, I mean, I'm going into social science here, but I need to, in order to answer your question. Uh, Usually, there was industrialization before democracy came in. So in all countries. So you had USA, you had a basic industrial base. Europe, was colonizing other parts of the country, so they had a certain affluence and they had a civil society. They had mass education and all of that before democracy came in. Uh, in India, democracy came in as a part in a feudal backward country, and when we got our independence, not many people, most of the academics and intellectuals said that India is unlikely to survive as a democracy because we're not literate enough. We don't have the knowledge base, we don't have the economic base, and yet we survived. And we had, as I said, one of the most stellar records in terms of press freedom in the post independence period in the decolonized world. But now, although we have a nominally free media, the censorship is taking place in through a certain polarization and through a corporate control of the media. So if you look at, I mean, this is it's finally going to be resolved by a political struggle. But you look at, say, the funders of Fox News or the cohort that runs the Fox News, and you look at the corporates who make donations to Democrats. You need to understand that the fight, essentially, the censorship has taken a very different form these days. And this is because fundamentally our society and economy is changing. And now the basic contradiction, earlier it used to be against the state and the government. Now the media will also have to challenge corporate power in order to retain its rights. And people will have to challenge that power, because at the end of the day, we are moving towards an oligarchic system across the world. And this is bound to happen, because if the 1% who control resources will never want you to kind of talk about you. They will want a certain agenda to be going on the TV, and we need to realize this. So as and when corporate power is challenged over a period of time, these things will happen.
Thank you so much, sir. So, finally, we have the last question from Aditya Agarwal. So, any moderator for any TV debate has to have deep knowledge into the topic, and how he acquires all this knowledge in one night to moderate big debates so how does he acquire all this knowledge in one night to moderate big debates and discussions efficiently? And the same person does this task every day. So, like, the last thing is the condition that he's doing it every day. So, how can he acquire
So,
a deep criticism.
yeah.
Hmm.
See, one is don't confuse anchors with journalists.
Hmm.
Anchoring is something very different from being a journalist. ये वैसी बात हो गई कि मुझे क्या बनना है, तो मुझे हीरो बनना है. एक्टर और हीरो में जो फर्क होता है ना, वही एंकर और जर्नलिस्ट में होता है. कई बहुत सारे अच्छे एक्टर हीरो भी बन जाते हैं, लेकिन नेसेसरी नहीं है कि जो हीरो है वो अच्छा एक्टर होगा. ठीक है, वैसे ही in journalism as well, I would actually recommend that you people go and watch a TED talk by Rohit Sardana. He actually says that he was made to do a show on cricket, where he had to interview Kapil Dev, and he did not have the slightest of knowledge of what cricket was, what were the technicalities of cricket, what were the challenges of cricket. He was not interested in cricket, he was not trained in cricket, and he covered cricket for 2 years. So, you know how he used to just read Ravi Shastri's column the day before, and then he used to ask those questions to Kapil Dev, and you have to present for 18 minutes, in which I think the guest talks for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and and he did not even know the field positions on the ground, and he covered the World Cup. So that is the state of our media. These anchors who are talking about Article 370, Section 377, right to food, constitution, communalism, nationalism, they don't know jack. And I know this for a fact. But see, that is what I'm trying to say. Don't confuse journalists with anchors. Anyone who has a basic presentation skill and looks good can be an anchor. But to be a journalist, you need to have a knowledge base. And that is why I asked you to learn history and sociology. Those are the basic things.
Thank you so much, sir, for your wonderful insights. I'm pretty sure they were really, really helpful. And with this, we have reached the summit of this wonderful session that, as we all witnessed, was an enduring success. So, finally, I would like to extend a vote of thanks to the fathers who are always supportive of all the activities and the sessions that the Department of Political Science conducts. We were delighted to have amongst us the esteemed speaker, Mr. Anshul Trivedi sir, who not only expanded on the true nature of journalism but also instilled sense of exploration in our eager audience. Thank you for gracing us with your presence, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We are grateful to the teachers, Dr. Preeti Sharma, Dr. Akanksha Natani, and Head, Department of Political Science, Dr. Meeta Sharma, for organizing yet another invigorating session. Lastly, we're grateful to the students for their patient listening and participation. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, sir, for the thought-provoking session, for finding time to address our students and to make them aware of different aspects of journalism. It was really an informative session. Thank you. Thank you, sir.